been a long time that we've just been doing our events looking at cameras, so it's always really nice to see everyone talking to each other and to kind of be reminded what Factory Berlin's about. And I think that this simple game kind of describes it. So we're really all about community and collaboration and networking. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Sebastian, our Director of Growth and Success, who will be moderating this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Hi, everyone. So this is two firsts for me. First event moderated since more than 2 years, and actually the first event in our Creators Lab, so I'm really looking forward to it. As Charlie said, today it's about entering the German market. So what we have seen over the past 2 decades, that Germany has become a thriving market for business, not only because of Brexit, but we have seen talent, people, entrepreneurs and ventures coming to the city and build stuff together and build something new. However, entering the German market presents unique challenges which can be hard to navigate for foreign businesses. That's why we're here. We want to shed some light on that. Today, we've invited 4 members, as Charlotte said, from our community who have first-hand experiences, years of first-hand experiences of the difficulties to set up in the German market, and they will share some ideas on how to tackle them. But before that, we will do a short intro round. You know my name already. Charlotte said I'm the Director of Growth and Success, so my responsibility is actually to help founders, corporates, startups and scale-ups get excited about Factory Berlin, and when they have joined us at one of our 2 locations in Berlin or in Hamburg, support them with all I can to get to know the right people, to get visibility and to thrive in our ecosystem. So that's me. I have a background in logistics, so everyone who wants to talk about logistics, have a guest here on stage, hit me up later, but startup topics are always cool. So, handing over to you, Maximilian, for a short intro.
Perfect. Hello. Hey, my name is Maximilian. I'm the country manager for Germany for OrderChamp. OrderChamp is a B2B wholesale platform connecting 4,500 brands to 75,000 retailers in Europe.
You can, if you want to.
Okay, well, before that, I worked for a telemedicine startup. It's called Krü. It's from Sweden. They entered the German market. I built the operations and sales team for them. And before that, I worked for Audi, different stations within IT, corporate strategy. And before that, I worked for a consulting company.
You still look so young.
I'm 33, actually. Like, I don't have a beard like you. So...
Perhaps I should shave and look a little bit younger again. Carolyn, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Carolyn. I have my own company, which is called Plan C, and I help companies enter the European market. So I'm German, so of course a lot of companies want to enter the German market. Among my clients, at the moment I'm working for Squarespace, the website builder platform. Before that, I worked for companies like Udacity or Robo.com, the dog-sitting marketplace. And my last proper job, as my mom would say, was working for Airbnb, where I launched the marketing in Germany.
That's why I love our community. So many people with so much experience hiding in the corners and then coming forward for events like these. So good. And now you wondered, I said we have 4 guests. There are 2 more, which are still hiding behind the screen. So let's hand it over to Torbin from Konto. There they are.
Yes, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Torbin. I'm the country director for Konto Germany. Konto is the leading European business finance solution. We basically simplify everything from everyday banking and financing to bookkeeping and spend management, with the goal of basically making sure that SMEs and freelancers can achieve more. What we entered the German market at the beginning of 2020. What I did before was I worked for Bird, a micro-mobility company where it was about the go-to-market for southern Germany and Austria. I also previously worked in fintech for a rocket internet startup, and I also worked in management consulting before. And I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. And now handing it over to New York.
Hey everyone, I'm DV, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Deed. Deed is a B2B SaaS company, and we work with companies like Airbnb, in Adidas, we make it easy for their employees to donate to and volunteer with causes they care about at work as part of a company's corporate social responsibility strategy. And we're really aiming to shift the paradigm around ESG and CSR, really transitioning from more of a me to a we movement, listening to employees as strategic and important stakeholders in deciding and determining what a company's focus should be in their community investment programs. We are based between Brooklyn and Berlin. I'm currently in Brooklyn. Pleasure to be part of the panel.
Thank you so much. So true hybrid Corona event with a live channel over to New York. I'm super proud that this is working out nicely. I think we are all eased up, but still I would like to open it up with a warm-up question. So why should companies actually consider the German market more, and what opportunities does it present? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I mean, Germany is one of the largest economies in the world, so simple answer. Okay,
who wants to add something to that?
Then I'll add something. Well, we have more than 80 million people, largest country in the EU, so pretty big.
I would say it has a thriving pool of talent, international talent at that. Many English speakers, many former Americans. With us, not by design, not on purpose, but our company, we have about 21 people at our Berlin office, and not one is German. So welcome Germans to apply for open position.
I can definitely second that. So I would say it's first of all the potential, at least for us, it was the potential. Us understanding ourselves as a European company, of course, it was the next logical thing to do, to launch in Germany. And not just for the customers, 3.5 million SMEs, 4 million freelancers, and roughly 600,000 founders every year. So it's a big number, but it's not just that. It's also that these companies are open for digital solutions. So when we compare it to our other markets, Italy and Spain, many German customers are open to digital solutions. And the talent part of it is also a big thing, especially in Berlin. But not just in Berlin, let's not forget how decentralized Germany is compared to other European countries.
I think these are both very interesting aspects. I've seen many teams over the years, just as Deed, who are deciding for Berlin with a focus on developers, because hiring here is sometimes easier than in other markets, especially in the US. So I've many teams who actually built their development team specifically here in Berlin. And then funnily enough, I have Berlin-based startups who built their development teams in other countries like Ukraine, Belarus, and so on. And also the aspect of the German market and the interesting fact that Germans are, and I learned something new, Torbin, eager to adapt digital models on a corporate basis in banking. Because I have seen in my corporate life quite the opposite and quite a lot of paper. So interesting that this is finally shifting. Let's move over to the next question, which is basically kind of adapting or docking onto that, which would be, what do you need to understand about the German business landscape and the culture to take on the market? Because culture is an important topic. Torbin, do you want to go first?
Sure. So first of all, when we talk about the business landscape, it really depends on which sector you're in and what your target customers are. Are your target customers also startups? Are they traditional companies and so on? But one thing to definitely keep in mind when we, for example, compare it, having started in Paris, is that Germany is much more decentralized. So of course you have a big hub in Berlin for certain industries, but also when it comes to the overall economy, it's very much distributed among Germany. I think when it comes to culture, it's definitely the number one thing that comes to mind is trust. So I think what's really important in Germany is to build and bridge trust to reach the German clients. So we try to do that through partnerships, through naming flagship clients, but it's also just about the little things. For example, customer service in our domain is super important for German customers. They say, hey, we might not know you compared to a traditional bank. So it's really about making sure that the German client feels at ease and has the feeling that they can reach out to us at any time. So in other words, it's super important to be local in the German market, which of course it is in many different countries as well. But I would say especially in Germany. And when it comes to talents, we already talked about it. So it's a great talent pool from all over the world that comes to Berlin. And what's super interesting is when we think about now, I guess we're talking also about Berlin. It's an ecosystem that has evolved only recently, I would say. So in the early 2000s, it wasn't really the case that there was like a big tech scene in Berlin. At least that's the feeling that I get when I talk to founders, when I also talk to serial entrepreneurs. But really towards the end of the 2008, 2009. So if we look at where we've come in the last 10 years, it's really a big dynamic. It's also compared to other markets when we look at the US, when we look at Asia. So that's really interesting, I would say.
I would add to that question another perspective. What would be pitfalls that foreign companies have when they attempt an expansion in Germany?
That's a good question because we of course, I can tell you some that we've encountered, but also some of our clients, because some of our clients are founders or startups also that started in another country and then want to enter the German market and they need a business bank account. So I would say the first thing is don't assume that the needs and requirements will be the same in Germany than in your home market or in your other countries, even if they look similar. So it happened in our case. We launched with the French IBAN in the German market, and on paper it should have been okay. Technically, within Europe, with the French IBAN, it should work the same in Germany. In reality, it didn't, because banks discriminated against the French IBAN, and customers didn't like it either. So actually, what the first thing we needed to do is adapt that. So don't think that it's going to be easier than in your local country just because you did it before. So that's, I would say, the first thing. Don't underestimate the trust factor in Germany. So helping, like, if you can use any kind of partnership or a flagship client at the beginning that German customers know, that's definitely a help, and it will help you with customer acquisition, I would say. And then as a more general comment, I would say, don't scale before you reach the local product market fit. So the first mistake, I guess, that many founders or companies then make is to try to scale and really use hard dollars on performance marketing, on growth, before they actually have to fit within the German market. And they try to convince themselves that things are okay and will change for the better. But actually, you really need to take a hard look at yourself and always look at, okay, have we reached that point yet?
Thank you.
And I guess the fourth point is really about culture. So it's really about making sure that while you grow within the German market, to maintain the day one mentality. I guess that's a more general point, but the culture needs to fit within Germany, but also within your company.
Carolyn, I would be interested, because you also quoted quite a lot of experience in your professional lives with international companies coming to Germany. What would you add to this pitfall question? Because I can imagine you've seen many things, especially with the early days of Airbnb and so on.
Yeah, I think overall I completely agree with Torbin. I think there's not so much to add, but to put a positive note on that, yes, which I love, is if German consumers like trust you and buy you, I would say it's like a marriage, you know, that's they true. Rarely leave you. It's really a divorce that's happening with your brand. So I think that is something that you do not see so much in other markets. There are a lot of people who try out brands and products and switch from one to the next and go like shopping, whereas German consumers, if you're in their heart, you're often there forever, unless you really make a huge mistake.
And I also can add to that. I see a lot of German brands who are very good at using community to actually build their products. And by building their product with the community, obviously you're creating a very strong bond. And I think that's a cool learning, which also international startups can learn from German companies, especially from B2C, that it takes time to build that. But if you have that, they become spokesperson for your brand. And I think the closer you can get to the Germans in terms of the product and the much detail you put into it to make them feel at ease. And it's often the little things like thoughtful Christmas gifts and stuff like that. I mean, I'm talking as a German, no pressure. I like Christmas gifts, but these things count. Especially in a B2B environment, trust is one of the main factors. Big time.
Building on that, one anecdote, like what I love to use when I kind of help localize products is German sayings. You know, like, es ist noch kein Meister vom Himmel gefallen, something like that. If you use that in your customer service copy, it just sounds so much more human and so much more natural than if you have these macros saying like, thank you very much for your message, we have received, like in German, whatever. So I think this is one of the things I like to integrate as much as possible, you know, this kind of connotation of Germanness via sayings which only Germans know and understand.
Mm-hmm. Maximilian, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just like you said, something positive about like trust, and I also I know some software as a service companies, and they use comparison websites as their main source for leads. So it's like really, I don't want to say like crappy websites. They don't look super professional, but they compare something, and this is their main source of leads, just by building trust. And you can really leverage that as a founder, as a young startup. They're like, just approach them and say, hey, I should be on that website.
I actually never thought about this. We have this website and company in Germany called Stiftung Warentest, but this is feels like very German if you think about it. Divi, what would be your perspective on this to end the round? Because I think we're talking about entering the German market, but everyone is German except you, so I'm eager to understand what you think about that.
It's interesting. I think, you know, speaking more from a technical perspective, you know, data compliance, data privacy, Germany really pioneered, you know, GDPR and everything around it. And so for us, our very first client, serendipitously, was Adidas. Oh. And we were working with their US-based counterparts originally in Portland, but obviously, the main headquarters are in Herzog. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, near Nuremberg. And they were very adamant about data protection, data privacy. Being a very early stage startup at the time, that was obviously very difficult for us to go through. And, you know, obviously now, many years, I guess that was like 3 or 4 years ago, there are many different services that you can use to help you become more compliant at a much earlier stage as a company that are out there and available. But I think it's obviously a very challenging exercise for a company that's short on resources to really focus on compliance when they want to focus on innovation and building products. So it's definitely a challenge, but I think, as everyone says, once you're compliant in Germany, you're compliant almost everywhere else.
Good point. I mean, Germans love their data privacy and all of what's related to that and made it an EU project. So I think this also boosted a lot of developments with larger tech companies like Apple. You actually already privacy and all of what's related to that and made it an EU project. So I think this also boosted a lot of developments with larger tech companies like Apple. You actually already touched a point which I wanted to ask you, actually also from this non-German perspective, which is bureaucracy and what the major difficulties or hurdles are in setting up that official business and the most common and often costly mistakes you can make as a startup entering the German market.
We've learned it the hard way, needless to say.
Tell us about it.
Oh man. It's honestly, I don't think the nightmare that we went through is definitely atypical from our understanding. But we're a bit of an atypical company. We're originally a New York-based company. We kind of serendipitously hit it off with a couple of really great VCs in Germany. So we're actually German VC backed by Power Ventures and Early Bird Ventures as well in our Series A. And early on, before we had connected with the VC, we started hiring in Berlin for all the reasons we've already outlined. And we were advised by a tax accountant a new term that we weren't familiar with here in the US. A tax lawyer, or tax accountant, actually. And we were advised to open up a branch office and not a full-on GmbH. And we were kind of working with this accountant. They were running our payroll. Didn't know about Personio at the time. I don't know if they existed yet. And we ended up getting, it was a very sticky situation where we were paying our employees, we were paying taxes, we were paying all the required, we were making all the required payments. And then all of a sudden, the tax accountant stopped responding. We got a bill from the German tax authorities for 70,000 euros in back taxes that weren't being paid. So I would say that invest in doing it properly early on, and make sure that if you're investing, like obviously many companies nowadays are hiring folks all over the world. So Germany is just one of the places that they're hiring, right? And that's made possible by all of these new employer of record services like Deal and Remote.com and a number of others. And to me, not to talk badly about experiences or their platforms or products, but it's very difficult to be masters in local law, especially in Germany, if you're trying to be masters of local law in about 100 different countries. And so we compounded the issue because we were kind of stuck and needed a very quick solution. We went with one of these services as an employer of record. We transitioned from the branch office, and we were essentially leveraging their platform to pay our employees. And very quickly also realized that we weren't necessarily in compliance, even though they told us we were, because there's, as an employer of record, if you're using an employer of record, you can only pay employees, you can only hire employees for up to 18 months on a temporary contract, and then you have to kind of re-sign a new contract. And for obvious reasons, people are like, what the hell is this? This doesn't make, why am I not being employed by deed, etc. And so now we're in the process of getting incorporated as a GmbH, especially as we grow in scale. And all I would say is, if we had invested in that from the very beginning, we would have saved ourselves a lot of headache. It's not easy to do, especially if you're not a German speaker. So I would just say, make sure you have someone you trust. Make sure that they know they have a very good understanding of local labor laws, tax laws, and all the implications. And invest in doing it properly on day one, if you're already planning on building out a team in Germany.
That sounds like real German bureaucracy. And we all know that from private life, getting an appointment in a Bürgeramt is still feeling like Stone Age in Berlin, just to quote this one. But not to bash too much on the German bureaucracy, I think there might be hacks to circumvent that. So I know of companies who help setting that up, so fully agree you need there's the trust again, right? You need people you trust to help you build it up, and then otherwise you learn it the hard way. Would the others in the round have hacks on how to circumvent that, on how to set something up in the German market?
Well, I think the question is why you want to have a business unit in Germany.
True.
Like if it's only about hiring people, what DV said is completely right. Like you have so many ways of having people on the ground without setting up a business unit that I don't think it's even necessary. I mean, factory is one example. You have a lot of freelancers here. You can start with freelancers before you hire a team. And like for a lot of work, you can actually outsource before building it. And then once you have this, I would say, circle of people you trust because you work with them on a daily basis, they have a network and can refer people. So I think that is oftentimes companies go too fast into building a GmbH business unit without thinking about, are there any shortcuts?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately what we did at Konto. So we started with a Zweigniederlassung, with a branch. And we started out without being able at the beginning to have local contracts. So we had a team, a small team that started from our headquarters and worked with freelancers in the German market. and then opened our office in the factory, and are now able to hire people. So it was a bit of a careful approach at the beginning.
So, turning to another perspective on how to enter the German market, I would like to ask the question about how do you establish an understanding actually of the product market fit for the German market. This morning I had a chat with a Swiss startup in the medical tech space, which solve a problem with sleep apnea, is it the English word? And we were discussing that basically people have sleep problems all over the world, so it will be a communicative perspective, but the product doesn't necessarily need to be changed because the problem is the same. But I can imagine there's different aspects to that depending on from where you're coming from. What would be resources to look into if you really want to learn how to understand the German market when it comes to product market fit? Carolyn, do you want to go first?
Yeah, happy to take that. So I think a first step is to check if you already have some users in the country. You know, so many companies already have users in a country where they never invested. I mean, Airbnb is the best example. It grew super organically in Germany because people travel, and then you were in, I don't know, Zimbabwe talking to somebody saying, oh, you should use Airbnb for your travel. So the word of mouth is, I think, the strongest growth driver at the beginning. So you already have users. Then once this user base kind of organically grows, I think the best indicator is kind of a metrics, let's say, visits to bookings, whatever your product is. You know, it can be subscriptions whatsoever. And to see how this metrics is compared to your country of origin. The ratio will definitely be lower because your product is not localized, etc. But I think this gives a first indicator. And I think this is the metric I would always look at when going into a different market. Why? Because at the beginning you have the early adopters. They are really forgiving, you know, like all the product bugs. If the product is only available in English, no problem, they will kind of hack through it. But once you get to like the first majority, these people are less forgiving. So there's a high probability that this metric goes down, and then you need to keep improving your product in order to answer the product market fit.
Torbin, I would be interested in, is your product experience here in Germany for the end user different to the end user in France? And what would have been things you tweaked? Because I know you just recently came into the German market, so I would be very curious to learn that. Because I can imagine the Germans have a very different approach to banking than French people.
Yes and no, I would say. So I think the rationale for launching the German market and also the Italian and Spanish market was that the customer needs are to a major degree similar. So banking in Spain somewhat works similarly to Germany, but there are of course important differences. So for us, the core product is the same, but it's about tweaking certain things that unlock certain customer segments in Germany. So to give you an example, a dative integration in Germany is super important. It's basically a monopolist for tax advisors. Every tax advisor in Germany works with this software. That means we need the dative integration in order for our customers to facilitate easy communication with the tax advisor. And plus it's a huge trust factor as well. So those are the kind of tweaks that we're talking about on a day-to-day basis. And then it's about some product features that are different for the German market. For example, our feature for company creators. So if you found your own GmbH UG, you need a business bank account for that. And for Germany, we have a dedicated flow for that. So that's what we needed to build specifically for the German market. But at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that we leverage our core strengths from what we've developed, and we have our product team in our headquarters, and we have product managers in the German market, but then also making sure that we account for the local specifics. So, and I think that's a good approach. It's not always the same. It doesn't work for all startups. So if I think about, for example, PayFit, that works on payroll is super different between Germany and France. So you cannot really do that. So you basically build a new product within each market. But in our case, it worked out well.
Thank you. We were already touching quite often the aspect of hiring and hiring a local team. I would be interested in all of your advice for how to attract talent in Germany or in Berlin specifically. Maximilian, what are your experiences with AutoChamp?
Okay, so first of all, like, let's face it, in Berlin, competition is fierce when it comes to good talent, like in sales and other, like, for example, also support. It's really hard to get this stuff and like good people in. And so my best advice would be like, really try to hire talent with your vision, the vision of your company. Like, compared to Series B, Series C startups or established companies, on paper, you can't pay as much. So you really got people to understand that what you're doing, that it's important, that it matters, and really try to give them context. And this is for me, like, for example, I've been in interviews and then CEO just said, like, we're going to double this or multiply that, and that's it. And for me, that's not drawing a vision. It's really about getting them to know, like, hey, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for your job? Why is this so freaking exciting, what we are doing? And then you can really catch people, and then they will also take a pay cut. And this is, like, would be my main advice. And this is also why I joined AutoChamp, why other people joined AutoChamp, because, like, just as an example, because it's just, the vision is awesome. And yeah.
I can double down on that. Competition is really fierce. I hired myself for my team, and finding someone who is really energetic and really lives what he wants to do was really a challenge. And then what I learned is, you don't find the perfect candidate. You need to look into what is this person bringing with you, and are they excited about what they want to do. And I think this is the main factor. The rest can be learned in the end, because it's not rocket science. A lot of roles are not rocket science. You need to be able to execute and to transport what you want to achieve.
Totally agree.
And then the money is not the most important part, but definitely it's an important part also in the German market. I would be interested in another aspect of this as well, because what is different in a German local workplace culture? So what would, from an international perspective, Divi, I'm watching you here, what would be different from a workplace culture here? Because I can only imagine or assume you hire very international in Berlin still. So it's not necessarily you hire Germans, but I guess the culture is still different than the culture in Brooklyn. Is it?
I'll summarize it in one point. It's a negotiation on vacation days in Germany. Everyone wants 30 days plus of vacation and plus, holidays and all of that, which is great. But in New York, it's a very different conversation. It's usually more on dollars and cents. The previous point that was made, I mean, we're lucky. We're in a social impact space. So telling that story, selling that vision, it always resonates. I would say, it depends what kinds of folks you're hiring. We've made some great hires and we've made some not so great hires, as one would expect. But I think, with our focus on engineering, product, and design in Berlin, that brings a specific type of person to the job, and we've been kind of meticulous around culture fit, personality fit, especially given what it is that we actually do. But I will say, when we first started hiring in Berlin, say, 2.5, 3 years ago, it was a very different landscape than it is now. But in spite of kind of the red tape and bureaucracy and all of the previous points, it's definitely still a very attractive proposition. I will say you definitely have to have people on the ground. Companies in the States have been hiring throughout the pandemic in Germany. And I think, they've been kind of skewing everyone's expectations. And I think, really understanding the culture, understanding the vibrant ecosystem and kind of what people actually care about in Berlin. Right? Is it they want to go to a nightclub on Sunday, and it's cool that they show up to work later in the day on Monday, and that's a pretty expected behavior. But if you're a U.S. employer, you don't really understand that. So I think just really being a part of it, understanding like understanding the culture and really having people on the ground that champion your culture and kind of adapt your culture to the market is really important. So we hired an on-the-ground people team in Berlin, as well as a people team in New York to really manage that for us.
So I think a lot of startups will have a big wake-up call when the clubs open up again. So they had 2 years of productive employees, and now they all will come back in late to work because they party too hard over the weekend. But I actually have to support you on that one, because I was talking to a startup founder telling me about his interns' experiences. And I mean, Berlin draws a crowd, and people come here for internships, and they talk more in the interviews about the partying scene than about the job. So you should be excited about the job and not only about the party scene. So let's see what we wake up in 2022 when it comes to workplace show-up times eventually. Super interesting that you also have that. It's perhaps that's the Berlin thing. I'm not sure. I mean, everyone
Definitely
coming to Berlin turns up growing a beard, wearing only black, and every second person is either a DJ or a podcaster in Berlin. I can count the room and afterwards ask how many are DJs. In our team, I have lots of DJs, I can tell you that. No surprise. So we are almost at the end. I would like to have a closing round on the question of if you're going to kickstart your growth into the German market, then growing a local network obviously is very important. We're sitting in one of the coolest of Germany, in my opinion. What would be your advice for building and growing a professional network in Germany? Because I can imagine it depends on the product, but it's a lot of legwork still. Want to start, Maximilian?
Okay, so, well, what I actually, because I moved here 2 years ago, so I actually had this problem, and what I really do, I sit together with colleagues, and together we scroll through the network in Berlin. And then I just point out, this person is interesting, please make an intro. This person is interesting, please make an intro. And this, you really have to sit together with them, but this really helps. Like, I got really cool contacts through that, good network, PR people, different kind of industries. And I just talk to them, and this is my main advice.
I think that's an important point. Don't be shy to ask for intros. I do the same. I find a company I find interesting, and I want to have an intro, so I look who's working there, who knows someone who knows someone. That's the strong power of network. That's universal. That's working in every country, in every city, but it's something which is underestimated more than often enough.
Yeah, and people don't do it because it's kind of effort, and you're so busy in your working life, and then you kind of forget it. So you really have to make time for it, but it's worth it.
Yeah, talk to good sales trainers. They also tell you the same thing. Make 1 hour of your day in finding out new people and ask for intros. It's boosting your business. I mean, you're also doing sales and business development, so good catch. Carolyn, what would you point out?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the fewer, bigger, better. You know, like figure out who you want to achieve, who you want to meet. And I feel like often it's more like this, everybody a little bit. So if, for example, for Squarespace, we are in the art design scene, you know, that's what we focus on. It's nice if everybody starts a Squarespace site, but that's what we focus on. So I just really started going from one opening of a gallery and talking to the people and saying, like, can you introduce me to this person? And I'm looking, and in the end, I landed with the organizer that I wanted to achieve. So I think this is more my strategy. But I'm more in person than via LinkedIn, I'm sorry. I'm old school.
Torbin, what's your catch on this one?
I would second that. So I think, yeah, when it comes to professional network, it's of course important to know people that you want to know, but it's also about the intensity of that relationship, and you need to maintain it over time as well, I would say. So I think that's what I learned when I moved to Berlin as well, that it really helps to also maintain these relationships over time, to invest in them, and ultimately you will get introductions through that automatically as well to persons that are that person knows, and so on. So I think that happens quite naturally.
What's the US perspective on this one?
I would just make it short and sweet. Join factory.
Yeah.
He did not get paid.
Yeah, I just want to say.
Well, that's a nice ending.
First year is free.
But I think that's a nice sentence to end it. Join Factory. Let's forget your sentence for a while. But actually, if someone is interested in joining Factory, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Sebastian Brehm. I'm always eager for new contacts and intros. All fun aside. Thanks, everyone. This was big fun. The connection to New York was stable. Also, this is quite cool. And that was my first hybrid event, actually. Super proud. Thanks, everyone. This will be online on YouTube at some point in the next 1 or 2 weeks. So you can catch up, re-watch our craziness here on stage and share it with your colleagues. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So we do have, so that's the end of our moderated conversation, but before we go away, we do have a chance for everyone to ask questions if you have any questions for our panel. I'm giving everyone a moment to think about their questions. Anything? It was a pretty comprehensive, in my opinion. Here you go.
Hi, thank you so much. I found it very interesting when you're talking about product market fit, and I would ask you, like, do you have any other experiences, like what attributes of product market fit are transferable between markets? Because, for example, you mentioned if you make it in Germany in data privacy, everybody's going to accept you. Are there any other areas you would say are also transferable to other markets or from other markets?
You mean like where Germany is spearheading it? Because data privacy, we are kind of spearheading it, so if you make it here, you make it anywhere, but that's your question? Let me think about it. Maybe you have an answer, or one of you guys.
I think it's hard. I think the trust part is a good one, because how do you establish trust? Like if you look at platforms, like rating systems and so on. So this is just establishing trust. And I think if you find out, like in Germany, you have a trust problem with some aspects of your product, or in some kind of a matchmaking, like algorithm or so, you have a problem. If you solve that in Germany, you probably solved it in EU, I would say.
Thank you. Are there any more questions to add? Yes.
I think we already covered the sales part, but I would like to ask where you find the sales people or interns. What's the source of this waterfall? Or
I would be interested in this one as well. It was not easy to find someone.
Should I? So what we do, it's basically a mix of, like, first of all, direct search is super important. Like if you like numbers, like 70 to 80% of people would actually be open to a job change, but just 30% of those are actually looking for a job. So you have a high percentage of people who would change, but they don't look. So active search is super important. And I spend like every week like 2 hours, probably, like in the evening when your brain is dead, I just scroll LinkedIn, scroll people and just like write them. Our HR stuff also does that. You can leverage people, you can leverage your network, ask them to repost like job ads, and we work together with agencies. And they're like a couple. I have right now 5 agencies, I think, in Berlin looking for salespeople, and this is just what it needs. Like I want to hire like 14 people within like half a year, and you have to have some agencies there.
I also think an interesting aspect on hiring salespeople, because although I'm doing growth, that's my beautiful name for sales, I'm not trained in that, is look for people who positively burn for what they're doing, because you can turn them into these people easily. So I just hired, as I mentioned, I met someone who really was burning for what he was doing, and I just asked, hey, can you imagine doing that for us? And it worked out. So that's for sales what I can see. I meet so many people, and the salespeople often don't have a sales background at all, but they really believe in what they are selling, what they're doing. They're not selling, they are basically telling you a story about why they love their job so much. And I think this would unlock a lot of people eventually if you really look for these people who burn for what they love. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the job they are having, although that would be a good catch, but it can also be private stuff. So if you find someone who's really eager on doing something and can tell you hours about it, these are the people to look out for. That's my experience, at least.
And Germans love titles, so
True.
I would always recommend that you give the LinkedIn account of your whatever highest person in the room to your HR person, so she writes with the account of that person.
And the next question?
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for the very informative panel discussion. I had a question regarding, all of you had worked for companies that started outside of Germany and then moved to Germany. What is the point of time, or what's the key event or something when an entrepreneur who has a company in a different country should decide to enter the German market? Is there some KPI, some event, or some voice in your head that said, okay, now is the time, let's move there? So happy to hear the opinions of probably all of you.
Torbin, I can see you want to answer, but I also have one. I have tons of people coming to Germany because they want to live in Germany and decide to take their business to Germany and then learn eventually the hard way that this is not the right approach to enter a market, but they do still. But Torbin, I see you want to answer this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, the voices in my head, no, just generally, I would say, so how it was for Conto is that we felt that we were on a really good track in the French market already, and that we wanted to do the next step. So it was really about, we envisioned ourselves as a European company, so it was the next step for us. And when we began thinking about it in 2018. The team was hired in 2019, and then we launched the countries in the second half of 2019, beginning of 2020. So it was actually in a short period of time when the team was then ramped up. So it was really about making sure that you have a solid foundation in your home market before expanding to the other markets. But then we also decided to pretty much start all 3 international markets at the same time, which was a decision to facilitate learnings between the countries. It was good in that sense. So we were able to share learnings, to learn a lot from each of the countries. On the other hand, it was also kind of a game for resource allocation, because we were thinking about, okay, which country, which product feature is going to be prioritized. So once you launch the country, it's also super important to always think about how you want to set up your product prioritization. At least for us, that's the limiting factor, is the capacity of the product and tech team. And when you always say, okay, what's the biggest potential based on our existing customer base, it will always be your home market where you started. So you need to set in place certain things that allow you to avoid this game for resource allocation. So I think that's super important as well.
And any last questions? Yes, one last one.
Hi, I'm going to ask from a brand perspective, what would be your tip when it comes to transferring your brand culture and values when you're expanding, and whether you ever had the situation that you had to kind of bend your values because of like mentality differences across different countries?
I think the most important point is be clear of your brand values and your culture. I think most companies are not enough clear of that, so it's really hard to transfer it. And how does it manifest itself? You know, like, how does it express itself? And I think only if you have this core nailed down, then you can transfer it. And sometimes there are differences, you know. So, example, Airbnb had one of the values was like, be a serial entrepreneur. I wouldn't say that this is something that is necessarily seen in the German culture, you know. So we definitely were challenging for that, but it was not something that felt so naturally. So I think you can think of it like a bit of a synthesizer. Some things you put up and some things you reduce a little bit.
And if there's no more answers to that question, thank you all. Ooh, one last question. Okay, we'll do it.
Thank you. I want to ask, how do you win the heart of Germans. Right. So let me put some context. So there is this stereotype thinking, right, that Germans are not usually very willing to switch, like to make new, like to change, like the way they know how to do things. So, for example, someone who is used to using, I don't know, an Excel sheet, right, spreadsheet to do like stuff, and you come with a new software, and you're trying to like convince the person to say, hey, like this thing does this job, like helps you to do it, right? But then it's like, no, I've been doing this for like, I don't know, 10 years, and like the spreadsheet, like it works, right? The question, so how do you like overcome this, this barrier of, trying to convince, to say like there's this new shiny thing out there that, solves this problem for you, but maybe I'm wrong with the stereotype, maybe it's not German, maybe it's just like everyone, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is a German thing or not. Oh, thank you, I'm right, okay.
Well, I think it's an interesting B2B question because corporates often quote, we have done this always like this, so why should we change? From a B2C question, me personally as a German consumer, I would say if it's personalized, if it's really catching me as a person and brings me value, but it's also personal, then I'm happy to switch. So I was currently looking into energy providers and I was switched from one to the other, and they have the best customer service ever, are personalized, have monthly contracts and do a great job and are just there when you have a question, which you normally don't get with an energy provider. So as long as it's personalized and feels real, they have me as a German client, let's say. But from a B2B perspective, I think it's a quite different approach, although I would say and add, still it's persons talking to each other, so you need to catch the person.
Yeah, so from my perspective, like catching the person is super important, but I think like telling them or making it easy to switch and also telling them that it's easy to switch is very important. Like just B2C perspective, Apple, like on their page, it's telling you how easy it is to switch from an Android to Apple. There's a reason they're doing this. So I think switching, like really making it clear, like this is easy. Those 3 steps, this is the key for me.
Word of mouth, I would say.
Word of mouth, definitely, I would say as well. And also once you you build up the connection with the customer, it's about reliability, which then enhances the word of mouth again. So I would say German customers love if your product just works and does what it does. And they're not so happy when it doesn't work. Of course, that's a global phenomenon, but I think in Germany, it's really about the trust again, which you win through reliability.
And I think speed and approachability. So Germans don't want to wait for answers, which might be a prejudice, but I think that's something. So I get a lot of good feedback if you really quickly react to questions instead of waiting for the next day. But this might be a very generic one, but that's what I see with Germans. They don't want to wait.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this event. It was really exciting, and thank you all for joining us in the audience. So hopefully we learn a little bit more about winning the German market and then, by extension, the hearts of Germans. So we can stick around a little bit for networking, have a drink, and thank you again for joining us.